Medical professionals increasingly recommend pet ownership to support mental health and cope with the stress of modern life. Caring for pets can keep people engaged in their lives. It can ward off loneliness and contribute to physical activity and being socially connected with others.
And research by the Human Animal Bond Research Institute found that companion animals reduce stress and anxiety, promote healthy lifestyles, and boost the cardiovascular system. They can also help mitigate social isolation, which, as we all know, is a public health epidemic even before and especially because of COVID-19.
Employers should support employee pet ownership as a simple, effective strategy for boosting workplace well-being. Moreover, evidence shows that employee pet ownership benefits employers with meaningful workplace education and benefits programs.
Carol Novello is former CEO of the Silicon Valley Humane Society and founder of Mutual Rescue, a movement that celebrates the life-transforming bond between people and companion animals that began with online videos that have been viewed over 100 million times, and now a book by the name Mutual Rescue. Today we will talk with Carol about how the human-animal bond and how pet ownership can dramatically boost personal well-being and discuss ideas on how employers can support employee pet ownership. Carol, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
So let's talk for a few minutes about your professional background and how you eventually, or maybe inadvertently, became a national advocate for advancing the human-animal bond via Mutual Rescue.
Well, I certainly didn't think this is where I would end up with my career. I actually was a senior executive in Silicon Valley for many years, had a fabulous career at Intuit for many years, and I absolutely loved it. And just through serendipity, actually had the opportunity to join the board at Humane Society Silicon Valley. And one thing led to another, and they asked me to become president. And I just realized it was a fabulous organization doing really meaningful work. And I decided to dive in with both feet. So here I was with experience in high tech and with a Harvard MBA running one of the largest privately funded animal welfare organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area.
You know, if you were to sum up Mutual Rescue for viewers, it's really grown into something that's taken on a life of its own. But maybe you could sum up so people understand what we're talking about here.
Well, Mutual Rescue came about because when I started working in animal welfare, people would sometimes ask me, why are you helping animals when you could be helping people? And I found that to be a very curious question because I knew firsthand how much animals had transformed my own life, and I was seeing just how much of an impact rescue animals were making on the lives of people and the families that were adopting those animals. And so Mutual Rescue came about to answer that question, to really show people that when you welcome an animal into your home, it's just as transformational for you, and maybe even more so than it is for the animal that you're giving a second chance to.
I've watched several of the videos that you have, and it really covers a range of human situations. The common denominator is how either a cat or a dog helped an individual overcome adversity, or a couple work things out. There's a whole range of things that really bind these videos together. But the response seemed to be pretty overwhelming. The supportive response that it got really from the get-go. And what about that surprised you?
Well, I think the fact that animals can help humans in such a vast array of situations. So Eric and Petey was about obesity and type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. Josh and Scout is a story about a cat and a soldier overcoming PTSD and traumatic brain injury. Buvana, Abhishek, and Lollipop is a story about how a cat saved their marriage. So you just have this wide array of human conditions or human suffering and human woe, and how an animal, by becoming part of the situation, dynamically changes those circumstances in a very profound way.
Yeah, you noted in your book there are studies that show pets can help boost our emotions, and you talked about that, but even they can even help people who are at risk of mental or emotional disorders. Tell us a little about that.
Well, it's really interesting, and there's been a lot of studies. Rebecca Johnson out of University of Missouri, Maggie O'Hare out of Purdue University, they've basically shown that there are physiological responses in our bodies that happen when we interact with animals and with our pets. So prolactin, serotonin, oxytocin, those are feel-good neurochemicals that are being released in your body. So there's a physiological change that is then impacting your emotional and mental well-being, and that's something that I think, I like to say they're like a furry antidepressant, without having to actually take the pill. So um, that is amazing that they're physically impacting our bodies in very profound ways, and that can make a big difference. And we can't overlook just the experience of unconditional love and having someone just be excited when you walk through the door and giving you a sense of purpose.
What about people with anxiety, depression, that are either at risk or beginning to deal with something? Mood disorders. What have you seen in the research or in your own experience about the potential for pets in mitigating or helping people in these conditions?
Yeah, there is a lot of research that points to the fact that animals can definitely make a difference, and for all of the reasons that I've stated. And it's interesting, more and more therapists are also turning to bring animals into their practice. There's a wonderful psychotherapist that I've gotten to know through the Mutual Rescue Initiative. His name is Dr. Adam Dorsey, and he has a dog that is part of his therapy practice. And what he notes is that people, especially men, are much more likely to open up and share their feelings when the dog is present. There's a sense of safety and a sense of acceptance that makes it easier. And so, I mean, everyone has to assess this, for themselves. For some people, perhaps an animal might feel like too much responsibility. But in many cases, it does give you a reason to get up in the morning and to experience a feeling of being needed and necessary in the world. I think one of the things that was most interesting to me in writing the book was actually learning about the role that animals can play in addiction. And this connects back to kind of, depression and loneliness and that kind of thing. But addiction, the research more and more is showing that essentially it's an inability to connect or to feel connected. And that is what's driving the addiction, that you're actually using alcohol or food or gambling or whatever as a substitute for connection. And so the role that an animal can play is to create that sense of connection.
Let's talk about isolation and loneliness during and after COVID. Tell us a little bit about how pets can be a part of the equation as more people work from home and the risk of isolation increases.
By having animals in your home, you're creating secure anchors, safe havens, you're releasing neurochemicals in your body. It's giving you a sense of connection. It also gives you something to post about on social media besides something related to COVID. It is amazing to me, the posts I get the most on social media. One of my most recent ones was a discussion about whether or not the dog was allowed on the bed when the cat is allowed on the bed. And the response overwhelmingly is that yes, since the cat is allowed on the bed, the dog should be too. So, there's so many benefits to it. And I think that as we work from home, and hopefully there's going to be an integration. We're not all just going to go back to the office, because the other piece of the puzzle is we also have to consider the well-beings of the animals. And so getting a dog and being gone 12 hours a day, that's not a good scenario for a dog to be alone like that. And so if we can work from home, or we have an ability to integrate our lives in such that we have a day in the office, we have a day at home, it makes it possible for more people to have animals, right, especially dogs, in their life. Cats are a little more self-sufficient, And so, when I started working at Humane Society of Silicon Valley is when I got my first dog as an adult, because I could actually bring the dog to work with me. And up until that point, I didn't have the option of bringing a dog to work, and it was something that I always wanted to do. So, I love the fact that we're talking about what that potential might be, because I think there's huge value to people and to organizations by encouraging the relationship between people and pets.
Preparing for the interview, I pulled together some statistics from a study by the Human Animal Bond Research Institute. 90% of employees in pet-friendly workplaces feel connected to their company's mission, more engaged in their work, more likely to recommend their employer, and that offering benefits like pet insurance and other things that make pet ownership more affordable and easier can actually boost engagement, productivity, retention. These are good benefits. I mean, good things for employers to achieve. So let's talk a bit about that. And given that it's pretty clear that the human-animal bond and pet ownership is good for individuals, what employers might think about to do proactively in the workplace. But just what's your general take on what you've seen out there as far as what companies are doing, what they are considering doing, and then maybe we could talk to those who haven't yet, but what they might do to put a plan in place?
Well, I want to take a step back first. I think it's important to frame this in the context of the role that animals are playing in our lives. And so there are about 190 million pets in the US and about 74 million children. So there are almost twice as many pets as there are children in the US. And so pets are increasingly viewed and experienced as members of our family. And so if we're going to be a workplace that is supportive of work-life balance, being supportive of people and families, then we need to expand that definition to include pets. So I think framing it up that way is very important. It's not just this thing on the side. These animals, these creatures are becoming integral to the way that we live our life. And when you, again, have twice as many pets as you do children, that's an indication of the dynamics and how the world is changing. And what's very interesting too, I read that of pet owners, 2/3 of pet owners are Gen X or millennials. So that also just speaks to the changing dynamic that employers are going to be having. And if you want to attract great talent, you're going to want to be able to have policies in your workplace that support the way people are living their lives. So I think that's incredibly important. Then you've got things like, the ability to afford a pet. And, if you don't have pet-friendly policies, the amount of money, especially if you have a dog, that you're spending on dog walking or dog sitters or doggy daycare, that can really add up. And so if you have a workplace where you can bring a dog, even if it's just, a couple days a week, or you have on-site doggy daycare. I know Zappos has been doing a poll of its employees year after year, and the number one thing that keeps coming up in terms of the benefit they want is on-site doggy daycare, which that's a pretty great perk if you could get it.
The Returns on Wellbeing Institute always recommends that employers approach any well-being initiative, including pet ownership, as part of comprehensive well-being strategy. So let's talk a little bit about what that would look like. One of the things that in our research we found is, while there are a number of different types of well-being, we focus on physical, mental, emotional, and financial. And it seems to me that with regard to pet ownership and employers, there's an opportunity to hit all three bases. Physical exercise, you've hit on that, and Eric and Petey.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that every afternoon I've got a 4-mile walk with my chocolate lab. But physical exercise, I'm sure that your data shows that people who own pets, or at least dogs, I don't think you walk cats too much, but dogs, they get out and they get physical exercise. Tell us a little about that.
People that have dogs are much more likely to be out walking, and that helps reduce weight, blood pressure. that kind of thing. But I think something that's even more nuanced than that is that, sitting for long periods of time is not good for you. You should be getting up and just moving your body for the benefit of, making sure you don't get blood clots as you get older, and just, not getting overly, stiff in your joints. You need to get up, every hour and just kind of move around a little bit. And when you have an animal, you have to pay attention, and it does cause you to get up.
The financial well-being, Steve, you hit on that yourself too. How do we create programs that not only take some of the steam out of having a child, but also having a pet? And you made the point very well, Carol. I think that there are both aspects, and they're both important, and we tie them back not just to what's the best thing for the employee, but what's the best thing for the employer. And when we can demonstrate that when an employer does these sorts of things, that employees have lower turnover and greater engagement and are happier in their jobs, it's a win-win. So you've seen that as well, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would like to add, just related to what we were talking about earlier in terms of physical well-being, is that it reduces healthcare costs. And the Human Animal Bond Research Institute, they're doing great studies, but they actually did a study that showed that pet ownership is responsible for saving almost $12 billion annually in healthcare expenses,
Wow.
which is just amazing. So, I don't know that I've seen a specific study that says, for a company that implements pet-friendly policies, they have a reduction in their healthcare costs. But it would not surprise me if that were the case. So I think it's important to look at, it's not just an expense on the part of the organization, that the benefits that are happening with your employees is gonna ultimately be a good investment for the company.
I want to talk for a minute about the financial well-being is a big part of our platform, and we pay extra attention to pushing half the U.S. workforce is struggling. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're making less than their state's median wage. Times are tough. And one of the first things that can happen during tough times, COVID-19 not being an exception, is that people can't afford to keep their pets, or they can't cover vet bills or a serious financial emergency, which can run into thousands of dollars. And, unlike health insurance, you can show up at the hospital and get treated. Not so with pets. But why don't we talk for a minute about what you think, and I'm actually talking to what employers could do to reduce some of that worry, because it can be a crushing emotional experience to have to choose between keeping a pet or letting them go, or putting a pet down, or being able to afford the treatment for a seriously ill companion animal.
I think access to pet insurance is a huge thing. So, again, to the extent that employers can find good plans and either underwrite part of that cost, or at least, negotiate a group discount so that the premiums are more affordable, that would be a great first step. The other thing is that there are a lot of animal welfare organizations that are working to help keep pets in homes. And so, for example, Mutual Rescue is actually just starting a program to work with shelters all across the country to either support pet pantry programs or to get new pet pantry programs up and running, which is meant to help people that are in short-term financial crisis be able to keep their animals so that they don't have to surrender them or don't have to rehome them. So it's about keeping families together. So to the extent that corporations are also looking at what are the animal welfare organizations in your community that are doing things to help keep pets and people together, and either supporting those organizations so they can, refer employees in emergency situations to those organizations, or also helping to encourage employees to volunteer at those organizations as well.
Some of the volunteer work I've done with animal shelters has been that people will adopt a cat and return it 1 month later saying, I didn't realize it was going to sleep with me. I didn't realize this or that. And it seems like a lot of those things could be both avoided, and you could be a little more strategic to match the right pet with the right person to get these benefits that we've been talking about. But do you think employers that want to support pet ownership should partner in some way with a local shelter that can do some of that sort of front end or behavior type assessments to make sure the proper matches are made?
Yeah, I highly encourage that. Humane Society Silicon Valley is very big on making the right match. And it really is about understanding lifestyle and asking questions to make the right match. And a lot of times people get really fixated on how an animal might look. And it's really not about looks, it's about lifestyle. And if you're super active and you want a dog that's going to be hiking with you and outdoors with you all the time, don't get a couch potato dog. Or if you're more of a couch potato, don't get getting a high energy dog is going to drive you crazy. That's not going to work. And so you really do need to ask questions about your lifestyle. And a well-run animal welfare organization is going to ask you questions, about your lifestyle and help make a match.
It's a new world out there. In that vein, Carol, can you talk about any companies who are doing this really well, particularly to cultivate better, greater employee mental health?
I thought that it would be unusual to find large companies that would do this, and in fact, there are actually large companies that are embracing it. Amazon is probably one of their headquarters in Seattle. Google is big. Etsy is doing a lot with that. But then there's also smaller companies. I read about an organization called Inverse Square, and they're doing that, and a digital marketing company. So it's really companies of all sizes. So I think if you're big, you shouldn't say, "Oh, that's way too much for us to tackle. It will, how are we going to handle it? We're too big for that." It's like, no, you've got some world-class companies that have implemented pet policies and are doing it. And if you're small, I think you're in a position to be able to get your arms around it in a much easier way. And you also shouldn't go, oh, well, we're not big enough to do it. When in fact, I actually think when you're smaller, it's probably easier to implement. And, there's like anything, you have to be thoughtful about it. You have to consider people in the office who might be allergic or don't like animals. And so, you have to figure out how to deal with that, how to create rules. Animals need to be well behaved, and their humans need to make sure that they're well behaved. So definitely things to think about and consider, but I think that the return on the investment that an organization makes is going to pay off in multiple ways in terms of what it means for their employees.
Any advice for CEOs or HR executives on the best way to handle this?
Well, for the first thing, I think you should be a role model. So if you don't already have a pet, I highly recommend that you go out and adopt one. Two, reach out to other organizations that are doing it well, and find out from them what they've done well, what they would do differently, and for sure, I think communicating is really important. Share the stories of people, especially on the executive team. I think that shows transparency, and also just helps make leaders appear more human and a way for them to connect with their employees. But it also validates and says, hey, it's okay for you to have an animal. It's important for you to have an animal, and makes it okay to bring that animal to work. So those would be my suggestions.
Last question. You are involved in a new project. We talked about it briefly, but tell, on a closing note here, what listeners can do to learn more about Mutual Rescue, what you're involved in, and where they should go next.
Yeah, so if you go to mutualrescue.org, you can learn more about our organization, which is promoting the adoption of homeless animals to help animals as well as people. You can view all of our short films there. You can learn more about the Mutual Rescue book, which is available wherever books are sold. You can learn about the Doggy Day Out program and find local shelters in your area. So if you're not sure you're ready to adopt, but you just want to spend some time with an animal, you can go to a shelter that has a Doggy Day Out program and take a dog out for the afternoon. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be rolling out a pet pantry program to make it easier for people to donate to pet pantries in their communities. So you can check all that out on mutualrescue.org.
Thank you very much.
All right.